Now, just a little warning here at the start that there will be spoilers for the latest episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier in this video, which is now the 5th episode, so if you have not seen it yet and you don't want anything ruined, it's a really good time to click away. Okay, so this was another very interesting episode, which doesn't necessarily mean bad. A lot of people seem to think I hated last week's episode because I called it interesting, when in reality I was more surprised at just where they're taking this show, how dark and complex everything is getting, to the point where you're left wondering, who am I supposed to be rooting for, who am I supposed to feel bad for, and just what exactly are the stakes here. And don't get me wrong, I very much enjoy complexity in my stories, but I just found myself surprised that this series was feeling more akin to something like Game of Thrones with its infinite shades of gray, rather than a comic book series where the two sides are usually pretty clearly defined. It's also felt like the comedic aspect has been mostly abandoned along the way, even though the writer of the series told us beforehand that this was supposed to be a pretty straightforward buddy two-hander, or something that could at times have fun and make light of the otherwise serious events going on. And there are certainly serious things going on here that could use a bit of levity at times. And kind of going along with this about how the show has surprised me thus far, the thing I found most curious about the series is that there is this subtle inference, intentional or not, that perhaps Thanos was right, or at least that a fairly sizable number of people ended up benefiting from the snap and had better lives as a result of it, that the world was better or well on its way to being better, which is what Thanos said would happen, that getting rid of half the population was a sort of necessary evil to make things better in the long run. Because, well, the Flag Smashers have made the claim that after the snap, the establishment fell apart, there were no more borders, and people just came together and they worked together, and we're making the world a better place for everyone, all the forgotten, as they say. And it seems like plenty of people feel that way too. They feel it was better if they have so much global or worldwide support. Even after the Flag Smashers have committed terrorist acts, they still have this support. And I mean, if people are willing to condone that level of violence, clearly they feel strongly about the cause. They feel that, again, the world was a better place during the snap or the blip, and that it should go back to something like that. They indirectly perhaps agree with Thanos or his method, though yes, some of the Flag Smashers do have reservations about the lengths Carly, their leader, is willing to go to, but like I said, the violence hasn't seemed to slow down their global movement. This is also the main and pretty much only point of contention between our two heroes or main characters, Sam and Bucky, how to deal with Carly, that is. Sam seems to think there is hope for her and that she can be reasoned with, and thus must feel there is something to her viewpoint that's worth paying attention to. While Bucky feels like maybe she's beyond hope, that she has gone too far already, and Zemo in this episode tries to reinforce that idea in him, that she must be killed, it's the only way to stop her because she feels so strongly about her cause, and that this belief has only been amplified by the super soldier serum, and the sort of side effect that comes with it, that it amplifies your beliefs on the person you are, as well as the power it provides. Also then in this episode, you had a local community coming together to help Sam and his sister fix their family boat, whereas the establishment failed them in that respect, where the bank wouldn't give them a loan, where the government, I guess, doesn't even pay an Avenger, someone who has literally saved the planet, well enough to be able to fix up an old boat, and I can't imagine it costs that much to fix. Either way, this is again sort of showing the power of people coming together to do what is right or what is best for the community, over what the establishment offers. And then you contrast all this with the story of John Walker, or the former new Captain America, who blames the government for making him the way that he is, that he did everything for them and for the country he loves and serves, but they discard him when it's convenient for them. But if there were no borders, if we just had one world and one people, like the Flag Smashers say, there's no need for men like John Walker, no place for them in a society where all the people just come together and help each other. We also had the return of Isaiah Bradley in this episode, who is clearly not a fan of the United States and doesn't believe it actually is for everyone. He spent 30 years in prison, experimented on the whole time, so that the US government could figure out why the super soldier serum had worked on him and not others, so that they could, you guessed it, make more super soldiers eventually, to help protect the country, of course, to help protect the establishment, that doesn't care about the people it has to use to protect itself. And so, in a way, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but I almost feel like the bad guy in this series, in what is essentially supposed to be a Captain America series, is almost meant to be the United States. I mean, if you believe John Walker, then the blood on the shield that we saw at the end of last week's episode is the equivalent of blood on the flag itself or on the country's hands. They are responsible for turning him into something that would do that. Then there's also, again, Isaiah Bradley's story and his belief that even today, the country would not accept a black Captain America. Sam also says at one point that the legacy of the shield is complicated, though I disagree with that. The legacy of the shield is more attached to Steve Rogers than to the US, I would say. And Bucky goes on to say that neither Steve Rogers nor himself understood what it meant for a black man to be handed the shield. And these are obviously some pretty big and deep topics. These are some heavy real-world issues that the show is tackling, issues that some people might not like being in this comic book series and that others might feel is the perfect place for them. And it's going to be very, very curious to see how this series ends for Sam, what he does and says exactly in this final upcoming episode when he officially becomes Captain America. Because clearly he's decided to take up the shield and to take up the mantle of Captain America. I mean, they didn't give us a montage for no reason, right? But what is he going to say about that? How does he feel about that? About what this country is and what the shield he's taken up now represents? And I'm going to hope and guess it's some type of message of unity and hope that we'll hear from him next week. I'm sure this series is going to end with some type of press conference where he tells the world that he's taking up the shield and why. But anyway, let's now dive into the episode itself a bit more. And this one ended up being both the longest episode yet, and the one with the least amount of action, ironically enough. In fact, I think the only action we got was that fight at the beginning between Sam, Bucky, and John Walker, which was an absolutely brutal fight to watch. Other than that, this was almost entirely character-driven, a calm before the storm, if you will, and there was a lot of great stuff between Sam and Bucky in here. I really loved when Sam pointed out to Bucky with his list and trying to make amends for all the wrongs he had committed as Winter Soldier, that he was going about it all wrong, that he was avenging instead of amending, and that he shouldn't be making himself feel better and trying to get closure. He should try to give closure to the people on that list. It was moments like this that made me really, really enjoy that first episode, and that I've been kind of missing since. We also had Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine show up out of the blue in this episode, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And yes, that is yet another character out of the comic books. She is a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who later on became Madam Hydra. I'm sure there's probably a dozen videos up right now if you want to dig into her past more. And it's hard to know what part she'll play in all of this, especially with just one episode to go. But clearly she seems interested in John Walker, who was as lost and confused as all of us, I think, when she again just sort of randomly shows up and approaches him and just goes on her little tirade. Sharon Carter was again in this episode very briefly to talk with Batroc and to pretty much, I think, confirm that she is indeed the power broker. With just one episode to go, I don't know who else they could really set up to be the power broker at this point, unless it's a different character we already know from elsewhere, but I would have to wonder who that could possibly be. Zemo was also once again in this episode, albeit briefly, and it looks like his story has been pretty much wrapped up here. That'll be taken back to the raft, which is almost a bit of a shame because I've really been enjoying his character. It's been one of the highlights, though his story did kind of come full circle. He was once again ready to die, just like he was at the end of Civil War when he beat the Avengers, but he had that denied. And so there's always a chance, though, we'll see him again someday, especially if others out there enjoyed him as much as I did. All in all, though, not a ton of plot progression here. This was more about getting the pieces in place for that finale after the last few episodes had really ramped things up. It ended with the Flag Smashers, with the help of some new weapons and such given to them by Batroc, attacking a GRC council meeting, and with Sam figuring out a little too late that that's where they were going thanks to being able to track the signal they were using. We then had the post-credit scene where US Agent, or John Walker, is making his own shield now, which means, no surprise, we've yet to see the end of him. There was also the cliffhanger about what's in the case that Bucky gave to Sam, though I'm going to guess, and it's pretty obvious, that it's just a new set of wings, probably made of vibranium, since his previous wings were destroyed. And I'm going to guess they'll maybe be red, white, and blue, and that this whole series will end with him proudly taking up the shield and offering up a message of hope for everyone in the MCU, and maybe one for people in the real world as well. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of the latest episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you fall somewhere in between? Are you enjoying the series overall? And what do you expect out of the finale? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Marvel. And until next time, thanks for watching.